Bo has consistently been one of the most underwhelming and mediocre brawlers, being undertuned in an overtuned meta. His mines have become more and more useless with the rise of speedflation, and his overall stats are just not strong enough to deal with power creep and damage inflation that has been going on recently. Now, let's continue the most worrying trend in this channel, asking for your support. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Only 15% of you are subscribed, so try and get that number up. Watch the full video if you're interested in the topic, and enjoy. Before I start, you guys should definitely join our Discord server. It's a fun community of mostly smart people, where you can find people to play with or join our gauntlet for the chance at skins and other rewards. First off, like always, let's talk about Bo's main attack and his basics. Bo has a pretty tanky health at 7200, and continuing the theme of 7, 2, and 0, his movement speed is 720, which is pretty neat. He shoots 3 arrows with a range of 8.67 tiles, with each arrow dealing 1280 damage. The attack has an interesting pattern, in which each arrow is shot in a sweeping spread from left to right, completing in 0.9 seconds. This is very similar to Leon's attack, though it is with less projectiles, but more damage for each projectile. Bo's main attack is nothing too special. It's honestly what you expect from your average Brawl Stars attack: mediocre damage, mediocre range, and a small spread of attack. Speaking of spread, the spread and the 1 tile splash radius of the attack allow it to be a solid way of dealing splash damage. Obviously not good, but better than nothing. It also allows him to somewhat control smaller areas, but obviously not that much, and not to the extent of what his super does. Bo's super is where things get interesting. He has one of the most unique mechanics with his super. His super sees him shoot 3 mines onto the ground wherever he aims. These mines are visible the moment that they are released and become invisible right afterward, only revealing once an enemy travels on the radius. Once an enemy travels on the radius of the mine will explode 1.15 seconds later, dealing 2880 damage per mine, destroying any environment around it, and knocking back enemies as long as you don't have Bo's Stare Bear star power, which I will talk about later. On a surface level, Bo seems like a pretty solid brawler. In his early to mid days, he was quite a powerful brawler. His main attack was quite dependable, and even noobs could reliably hit at least one of its shots, leading to a consistent damage output as well as an important supercharge. Speaking of the super, it allowed Bo to control somewhat large areas due to the threat of being hit by the mines. Speaking of Bo's mines, let's talk about them a little bit more in depth. Bo's mines are what truly completes Bo's kit. They allow him to create a very potent threat alongside his main attack, truly making him into a great controller. Not only do the mines physically give an advantage to Bo and his team for controlling areas, but they also give an important mental advantage. We fear what we cannot see. This statement rings especially true with Bo's mines. Not knowing where they are constantly keeping you on the verge of panic, as you do not know whether you are near the mines or far away from them. This gives an inherent psychological advantage to your opponents, who can tread freely across the map while you have to keep watch for mines, and are thus unable to operate at your full potential. You might be asking, why is Blood yapping about psychology in a kids game? First of all, I'm insane, and second, well, Brawl Stars actually has a lot to do with psychology, but that's a topic for another day. Anyway, the mines restrict the opponent's movement heavily by merely existing. The aspect of not knowing where the mines are leads to more cagey and passive gameplay. If you advance too far, you might get distracted by enemy fire and hit one of the mines, so you have to play passively in order to try and move up the map and be able to trigger the mines at your own leisure. Furthermore, it leads to more predictable gameplay, as once the mines are placed, people often move to other lanes in order to avoid the lanes with the mines are, and you can easily shut off the lanes if you predict correctly, gaining important control. Now that I've finished talking about the intricacies of Bo's super, let's talk about his main attack. His main attack is actually quite inconsistent in damage values, though it has a large damage potential. As I said earlier, the main attack is similar to Leon's, with an attack spread with multiple projectiles, having an inconsistent damage output and high damage potential. Ironically, this means that while Bo can consistently deal damage to enemies, it's not likely to be consistently large amounts of damage. This makes Bo an unreliable source of damage, which is why he's classified as a controller and not a damage dealer. But more importantly, it means that he struggles to compete in damage output against other brawlers. Keep this in mind. While Bow's main attack may not be the best, you cannot argue that at least in theory, Bow's mines are incredibly well designed, as well as powerful. They make Bow into a fearsome threat, able to control areas both physically and mentally, helping his teammates gain the upper ground and, more importantly, control and time. Yet he hasn't seen the top of the meta, or even near it, for a very long time. Why is that? First of all, let's talk about speedflation. So what is speedflation? It's quite similar to what damage inflation is, but instead of damage, it's an increase in the speed of brawlers or an increase in movement ability over time. Let's take for example some of the most recent brawlers that have come into the game. Kenji has a dash which he can use to artificially increase his movement speed. Clancy, once reaching stage 3, has one of the fastest movement speeds in the game. Angelo has a very fast movement speed, Mo has a fast movement speed, Shade has a very fast movement speed, and you get the point. Many of the brawlers released recently have fast movement, and this isn't even taking into account the speed buffs that hypercharged brawlers have been getting. So what does this have to do with Bow? It has to do with his mines. A long time ago, getting caught in Bow's mines unaware was very dangerous, and would almost guarantee you would be damaged by it or even eliminated. Now, however, most brawlers can just outspeed the mines even if they get caught unaware in it, and can easily trigger them on purpose. All of that talk about psychology and controlling areas has become useless now, as Bow's mines are no longer as useful for catching brawlers as they once were. I've mentioned this a little before, but another reason that Bow isn't as powerful anymore is due to power creep. Speed is one aspect of it, but the increased damage, health, and utility of the newer brawlers, as well as the introduction of hyperchargers, have all combined to make Bow less useful and less powerful as ever. He simply cannot keep up with the release of broken brawler after broken brawler. He cannot keep up with the release of hypercharges, making every brawler shoot up the tier list and have an even better chance of defeating Bow. At this point, why even pick him? He's outclassed by literally almost every brawler on almost every map. His niche of controlling with mines is dying out as it becomes less useful with the advent of speedflation, and his basic stats and underwhelming damage output are nowhere near enough to deal with most other brawlers in the game. Not to mention, he has two of the most underwhelming gadgets in the game. Speaking of gadgets, let's start talking about Bow's unlockables. Bow's first gadget is Super Totem, which charges his and his teammates' super 50% faster within his area of effect. The totem itself has 1000 health and a radius of 5.33 tiles, with a health decay of 50 health per second. This is a pretty interesting and unique gadget. It gives him a support aspect, as it allows him to support his teammates in getting their supers as well as his. However, it has a few negatives that cause it to be very underwhelming. First of all, it forces players to stay within the radius in order to get value out of the increased supercharge rate, which impedes dynamic movement, and if your enemies notice your team staying inside of the totem radius for too long, they can easily use a CC ability in order to punish your team severely. A second disadvantage is that it only increases supercharge rate, so it is dependent on if you can hit your shots or not. While this is a good idea, it just isn't powerful enough to make a real difference for Bow. Bow's second gadget is Tripwire, and Tripwire makes it so that Bow's mines will automatically explode 1.5 seconds after the gadget is used. This has some use, and can take enemies by surprise and eliminate them, or at least making it an easy job for Bow to finish them off. However, it's rarely pulled off in a real game, and most enemies are smart enough to stay away from the mines, or just bait out the gadget use. Furthermore, this gadget somewhat removes the controlling aspect of Bow's mines in favor of instant damage, so that's more of a nitpick. Bow's first star power is Circling Eagle, which allows Bow and his teammates to see 5 tiles instead of the regular 2 tiles into bushes. This is one of the most niche star powers, and is only really good on very bushy maps, with some examples being Snake Prairie and Cavern Churn. On maps like those, Bow is an automatic S tier brawler due to the very useful nature of his permanent extra vision boost in bushes, allowing his teammates to destroy the enemies without being seen. However, this is extremely niche and isn't a really big factor for his meta use. Bow's second star power is Snare a Bear, which allows Bow's mines to now stun enemies for 2 seconds. This is quite a useful star power, and allows Bow's mines to be much more powerful, and basically be a death sentence to enemies if they get snared in the mines. Of course, this only works if the enemy actually gets caught in the trap, which as I've mentioned before is quite rare nowadays, unless they are completely surprised or a slow brawler, therefore lowering the usefulness of the star power. Now that we've talked about most, if not all of aspects of Bo, how do we fix him? Well, I've usually strayed away from talking about balance changes, and that's a very touchy subject for many people, and a difficult one to get correct, but I think I'll talk about some general changes that Bo can use to be fixed. And just to be clear, this will not include a hypercharge. First of all, I believe he needs a damage buff. He's been hit especially hard by damage inflation and power creep, and the nature of his main attack makes it so that it's difficult to reliably hit 3 or even 2 of his projectiles. Therefore, it needs to feel more rewarding and useful once you hit those multiple shots. Furthermore, this will let him be able to be actually competing with hypercharged and broken brawlers and eliminate them. Another balance change has to be to his mines. I have 2 ideas. First, allow him to be able to shoot 4 mines instead of 3 with his super, like the old days. Yes, it may have been broken and annoying back then, but with the power creep going on, this might just make Bo meta without making him broken. It allows him to control a larger area as well as have higher damage potential. On the other hand, it won't help too much with speedflation and baiting, which my other balance change will. I believe that Bo's mine should get a trigger delay reduction. This will allow Bo's super to become much more of a threat to enemies, as it will become more difficult and skillful to bait out his mines, and this will not only be a much better dealer of damage and control, but it will be even more important psychologically, and cause enemies to become much more wary of the area near Bo's mines, allowing for Bo and his teammates to gain control much easier. As for those 2 mine balance changes, I personally think it should be probably either one or the other alongside of the damage buff, or we risk making it overkill and shooting Bo to the top of the meta like Frank and Daryl recently. Overall, Bo is one of the most interesting brawlers in Brawl Stars. He has a unique way of controlling areas both psychologically and physically. However, he has been negatively affected by the release of powerful brawlers and hypercharges, contributing to both speedflation and power creep, both of which have combined to make Bo one of the most mediocre brawlers in the game. However, this problem can be solved with several tweaks to his kit, modernizing Bo to fight against this new and powerful meta. Anyway, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.